afternoon, everyone. Appreciate y'all coming through. This talk is on performing incident response with the volatility framework.
Do you want to put the volume up a little bit? Okay.
Anybody here use volatility? Yeah. All right, so who am I? My name is Evan Wagner. My Twitter handle is Bun0xd. I've been working security full-time since 2013. Got my first domain name in 1999. Held all kinds of variety of roles in IT, Tier 3 systems engineer, software engineer too, senior software architect, and security administrator, and other things. And I used to be the Linux breakfast cereal kid. I want to install Linux on everything. Those days don't have that much time anymore. All right, quick disclaimer. These processes bring, and also these words are my own, not the company I work for, but these processes bring inherent risk. It should always be performed in a segmented/isolated environment. The tools mentioned in this presentation do not guarantee a warranty implied or otherwise. Statements made are my own and not that of my employer. So you gotta be careful when you're extracting malware out of a memory image. For all you know, the adversary expected you to load volatility. They have an exploit they built into it, and you just launched it. So you better make sure wherever you're doing your analysis is isolated. All right, what is volatility? Has anybody here heard of volatility? Okay, cool. So volatility is a framework for memory analysis. The first version was released at Black Hat and DEF CON in 2007, supported by the Volatility Foundation, and encourages researchers to contribute. So I don't know if y'all heard, but they just dropped last month the beta for Volatility 3 so that they can have Python 3 support, which was only supported on Python version 2 before. So they're encouraging people to beta test that out with them, and hopefully do some pull requests and contribute in some way. Like I said, it was written in Python, so it's great for operating system cross compatibility. There is a ton of plugins, so depending on the operating system that you're analyzing, where the RAM dump came from, you'll have commands that are all for Windows, OS X, or Linux. In this one, we're going to focus on the Windows commands. All right, so why would you want to use volatility? So there's a multitude of reasons for that, but it'll provide you the verbatim view of the running environment depending on your acquisition method. If your tool gets hooked into or whatever they expect your tool to run, they could tamper with the memory image. The adversary could. And so a foolproof method is to just pull memory straight off the PCI bus if you want to guarantee that the operating system is not going to in any way affect the memory image. Increasingly, malware will never touch the disk. If it does, it's normally temporary, and then erased or time stomped. So there's all kinds of malware. There's very low signature for it, hard to identify, and it'll go ahead and try to clean its tracks up. You might not be able to recover it. So working with memory, there will still be those constructs available because when something is closed, a process ends, those file handles that have manipulated the process, construct itself is still there. The network constructs will still be there until a new allocation overwrites it. Then, of course, we got all these benign sources for malware, the ad networks, reputable CDN, Facebook, Blogspot. People host malware on GitHub now, and just because of the reputation, they can just ride through and download everything. The data will be then decoded out of an image or other source, injected into a process, then exfiltrated over secure channels back out to the cloud. So we got to definitely start looking at memory, especially when you have no other tools such as sysmon, high verbosity logs, EDR, etc. And now the package availability. So this is basically how you'll get volatility on your machine. I suggest the vol.py method. Just go to GitHub, Volatility Foundation, download volatility package. It supports a huge amount of profile builds. So If you use the operating system package, I'll say specifically like Debian, it has maybe a half or less of the profile builds available on the GitHub repository. So you'll run into issues where the image you're trying to analyze, there's no profile build for it. And as far as Linux goes, there's so many different versions of the Linux kernel, you'll end up making your own profile. Okay, so you can get the binaries for Windows, Linux, and Mac at the volatilityfoundation.org/releases, and that's just a self-contained package. And like I was saying, you can get it for your distribution, but this is least preferred because they have incomplete profile sets. Recall framework, so it's a fork of volatility. Has anybody heard of recall in here? Recall's really good. I would suggest getting on recall framework because it'll satisfy the profile debug symbols. Like it'll go out to Microsoft and it'll download it for the machine you're analyzing it on. So recall is actually a live memory analysis tool. It'll load the driver, which will give access to the physical memory, and then it will do a KDBG scan quickly and figure out which profile build the system has, and then go download those debug symbols from Microsoft. So it's a really good way to get started. I would suggest recall because it's self-contained and it just runs live on the machine. Go over some terminology here. So, like I was saying before, profiles, PDBs, debug symbols. You have to select the correct profile for your operating system and build revision. Otherwise, you're going to see strange symbols. You won't be able to identify the constructs necessarily. This is a way, basically, to identify what these different artifacts look like in memory. Like, what does a process look like in memory? What does a network connection look like in memory? What does a file handle look like in memory? A mutex, an API hook, all these constructs are stored in these profiles, and that's how it's able to identify these different artifacts in memory. VAD tree, so VAD is the virtual address descriptors. This maps physical and paged out memory pages. So basically, it's like a table that you have a memory address, and it will basically map to either the physical memory space or a page space, so that when you your computer pages things out, you're running out of memory, you have to get that page file. Otherwise, you won't be able to recover that data that's referenced in the VAD tree. Some considerations. All right, so the total physical RAM. What size of the memory? Does it make sense to dump 128 gigabyte memory dump to file? Can I get the memory back in a timely manner? Do I use compression, right? So if you're dumping a 128 gig memory image and you only have 100 gig storage space, that's not going to work. So you have to be cognizant of that. How much storage space is there? Once you approach these huge memory sizes, it's better just to do live memory analysis on the box, because shipping it back will take forever in some cases, and you need to figure things out quickly. Like I was saying before with the disk storage, is there enough space to store the total physical RAM? Would this be performance impacting to use up the space even? Like what impact does it have on the machine? All right. Then we'll go with some acquisition methods here. I'm a fan of the PMEM suite of tools. So in this presentation, we're gonna go over commands with PMEM, which is supported on Linux, OS X, and Windows. It's kind of interesting because there's a tool called AFF4. I don't know if you guys heard of that. Anybody heard of AFF4 Acquire? So AFF4 Acquire, AFF4 is the Advanced Forensics format. All right, it's basically a container that has multiple streams inside of it. So you can say AFF4 Acquire these directories on the file system. AFF4 Acquire this boot partition, because you're going to need boot partitions in Linux to be able to get the system map and build profiles off for that specific kernel. But AFF4 is also in that family of PMEM tools. You can pretty much use it the same way. It's more standardized, but As far as PMEM goes, I suggest the Volatility repository PMEM. Okay. So if you look here, so WinPMEM, LinPMEM, whatever you're running, output, dump AFF4. By default, PMEM is going to do the AFF4 format, and that's a container around the physical memory, and it basically contains it as a physical memory stream. But if you want to extract the physical memory stream out of the AFF4 file, you just say, okay, I'm going to extract physical memory and now put it to dump.raw, and that'll produce a physical raw mem dump. Then, like I was saying before, if your space or timer constraints, then live memory analysis through recall is an option. If you're just getting started with this, go download recall. It'll make it a lot easier for you. It's interactive. Volatility does have an interactive shell, but you basically load recall. It'll download the debug symbols for your machine that you're on, and then it gives you an interactive shell, and you can go and say, oh, show me the process list, show me the network connections, open file handles. There's a multitude. We'll get to some of those commands. Another really good preferred method is converting VMware snapshots into raw mem dumps. So basically what you can do is you do a snapshot of the machine. It'll suspend for like a short period of time. Then you take the vmem and the vmsn files and you run it in vmss2 core, and that's this URL here. It's a free tool. I totally suggest it. It's really good. And that will convert those snapshots and the VMware mem image into a physical memory dump. So, very useful tool. And of course, you might not just want to run it on your own machine. You want some interesting memory samples, right? That have malware and other interesting artifacts for you to discover. So Volatility Foundation also has these hosted on their GitHub page. So you can just go to the URL on their wiki, memory samples. And they got almost a dozen memory images in there. Okay, so we'll go over the basic usage. What I prefer, like when I tell people to use the GitHub Volatility vol.py. So you basically just say home, username, Volatility. This is where your vol.py will live, and then you just reference that. Okay, so test launch Python, home directory Volatility vol.py h, and that'll show you the help menu. But if you want to list the plugins and you want to list the profiles that are available in your instance of Volatility, you do --info, and it'll show you all of the system images that it supports, and it'll show you all the commands that are available. Okay, so now, basically, how do you determine what profile to select, right? So that's a difficult thing unless you run the system util on the machine itself and get the exact profile build. Things like Windows 1904, Windows 17, whatever build. There's like over a dozen builds of Windows 10 at this point, so it's getting kind of ridiculous. But this image info command will try to assume what profile, or it'll suggest profiles for you to try and load. It's not the full KDBG scan though. Really quick, here is the using the selected profile. So we load in the file, the mem dump, our profile equals profile underscore build, which is, we can look at that here in a second, then PS list, and that'll show you the list of processes that were identified based on that profile's construct definition. So if it identifies any of the constructs that are in the profile build that are processes, the PS list command will list those out. Okay, so we want to try to respond to incidents with Volatility. So we want to discover malicious process artifacts and then dump them out of memory, right? So there's a multitude of ways to go about this, but basically, we'll start going over some of the commands here. So we've already seen the ps list command. All right, we -f the file, the profile build. We just discussed that. But then ps tree is a good one too. So basically ps tree, and then echo that into ps tree txt, psx view, and proc dump. And this would actually dump out like all the processes into a directory too. But PSX view is really one of the more powerful ones because it identifies, it's a more aggressive scan, and it can identify and tell you how the process was determined to be a process. Like if it's a CRSS entry, if it's an actual regular PS list entry, it has like all the columns and everything to tell you how it was detected. So the PSX view is a really good command. Then network connections. So these are the typical plugins that you would use to find network connections. ConScan, NetScan was probably the one you'll use the most, and SockScan. Okay, so file handles. Anybody here understand file handles? It's kind of like a basic or foundational thing on the computer. Like a file handle is basically a reference to a file in memory, so that we know that this process has a file handle to this file, and then that's basically how it knows what processes are owning and manipulating what files. So the file handles plugin's really good. Loader modules is really good. We're going to go into that a little bit deeper for finding malware here in a minute. And then dump files will attempt to dump all of the file handles out. This will produce this -s will produce a summary file, text file. Otherwise, it's just going to be a bunch of memory address ranges, and that doesn't help you when you're trying to determine the file name. So you got to have the summary file get dumped out as well. And then this capital D in volatility normally means what directory you want to dump it to. Okay, so volatility has a fair amount of commands for identifying malware. Malfind, what it'll do is basically search for what's called bad address protection violations. And so what that means is that you would set these pages in memory to be read-only or non-execute, or these different attributes that you can apply to it. Malfind will identify when those bad address protections to those pages have been violated, and it'll show you basically the first 100 bytes. And then there's indicators that you can see in there based on those 100 bytes to determine if they inject another command or program into this page. So it's a very powerful plugin. Mod scan for kernel modules, API hooks for when malware's trying to intercept calls to the API, the low-level Windows API. Command scan and command line and consoles. These are more so for finding like leftover artifacts from like CMD.exe and PowerShell. Any kind of callbacks, system timers, and SSDT tables. Now, what we do is we dump, if you're getting started, we just dump out all these things into these text files. And then you're going to want to grep to victory. So basically, what you have is, this is the case insensitivity. This is recursive. I don't know why I put that on there, but I guess so I can just do // But IOC, meaning you came to this machine for a reason. You're not just dumping the RAM off of this thing for fun. Okay, you have some kind of indicator, you have a certain time that you're interested in, something strange happened, and it's either, the machine flagged because it went to this domain name. Well, we're going to get into that in a second here, how you can actually identify what processes went to the domain name. Okay, so if you observe the indicators and then pivot to start extracting files and providing the PID/offset context. So that's our objective, is to find out what process was involved with our indicator. Okay. Now we're going to narrowing in on the criteria. Okay, so once we've identified the process, and we're going to go through an example of this here in a minute, but we're going to want to dump out the memory space, okay, and we want to dump out everything associated to all the files. And so when we have PID here, that's the process that we identified, and we're going to want to dump out files. And over here, we're going to say, hey, give me all the XLS files. Because we might have had an alert that said, this document attached to an email, caused an alert. And so you want to be able to go in and extract that out, and that way you can pull pull additional information from the malware, and then put those into your mitigation stack. And so, one second here. So proc dump here, dump it into this directory, unsafe in memory. What that does is it gives like the surrounding bytes, and that will help make sure that the file is completely intact when you're dumping it out, and that way it has integrity that you can do a hash check against it and actually collide with entries on like virus total or whatever. Okay, so you can actually kind of use volatility for some red teaming stuff too. Basically, you can dump out cache, you can dump out the certificates on the machine, you can dump out the registry hives, and you can even dump passwords out, hash dump, right out of the registry hive. As soon as you get the SAM offset information, you can dump passwords right out of memory. So, pretty powerful. Okay, anybody in here heard of Yara? Anybody use Yara? No. It's pretty good. So Yara is basically it's a tool for writing signatures and whatnot for identifying behavior. So I actually have an example of a really cool Yara rule on here. Let's see. Okay. Oh darn! You guys can probably barely see that. One second. Is that better? Can you all actually see that? Let me change the color real quick. Let me change the color real quick. Okay, that should make it more legible. All right, so what we have here is the Florian Roth God Mode Yara rule. So has anybody heard of Florian Roth in here? If you haven't, this guy is awesome. Follow him on Twitter. He doesn't have his name up here, but this is from his GitHub. Or, well, he doesn't have his Twitter handle is what I was trying to say. And does he have his Twitter handle? I don't think so. But he goes by Neo0x23, something like that.
What is he an advocate of, or what is he done for?
He's a security researcher, I believe, out of Germany. And he writes all kinds of tools, and I mean, really, really great stuff for doing investigation, mitigation like this. So let's just go over this Yara rule real quick, just to get y'all familiar with it, because if you haven't heard about it and you hadn't seen it, you're missing out. All right, so we say here, it says right here. There we go. So we got the name of our rule there. We got the meta information that says that Florian Roth wrote this, and then it has a little score setting. But really, what we're interested in is this piece here, right? So let's go down a little bit. Okay. So these are a bunch of strings and mostly strings. Sometimes you can put byte sequences in there too, but really, if you look at this, so decode, that's basically like base64 decode. W hidden, making a hidden window. Searching for these guys who make red team tools, okay? Securls, that's a Mimikatz keyword there, all right? Convert, or system.convert from base64 string, that's the PowerShell.NET function for decoding base64. Inject DLL, reflective loader, interpreter, these are all like indicators of compromise or whatever. They're the IOCs. And so you can just kind of put them all in there, and you can say, okay, condition, one of them. So just you can say any of them too. You can put in the comparison logic or operators, but it's really powerful. I just wanted to show you all this, and I totally suggest you guys follow Florian Roth. He's really good. But Yara is definitely super powerful, and if you're not using it, you gotta get with the program. Okay. All right. So this is where we use Yara to basically get to victory quickly here. We use the Yara scan command, and then we say IOC. IOC could be the name of the file of the attachment. IOC could be a domain name. It could be an IP address. It could be all kinds of things. And so what you can load in place, instead of putting Yara-rules, you could say that you want to load the file. And that's where that God mode Yara file comes in. And that's just to find obvious malfeasance. The -- kernel will specify if you want to search kernel space for it. And then -- wide is for 2-byte characters like Unicode. By default, it's going to search ASCII. And then you just, send that into a file. So now we're going to do a quick run through. We got a memory image. We're like, something interesting happened on this box, when we're investigating it. So when we go through here, we're looking at the processes. You got LSAS there. And then we got more down here. So there's like a famous SANS poster that says, knowing evil. How many of these executables are you supposed to have? What is normal, right? So this is one of those things you need to be able to quickly identify, okay, there should only be one LSAS process, all right? Notice that there's no exit time here. If this was an exited LSAS processes and they just kind of were, the constructs were just left over in memory, you would see the exited time, okay? We don't see that, so that means that it is running alongside the other ones. Here we just kind of highlighted here, LSAS there, these two LSAS down here. Okay, now remember when I was talking about the malfind plugin earlier? Really good tool. So it basically identified that these protections, page execute, read, write, and it said, okay, this protection was violated. Now we see this. Does anybody know what this means? It is an executable. It's a Windows executable when you see MZ. Okay, so whoa, at this page in memory, we have an injected MZ header right here. Okay, now it's getting interesting. All right, we're going to want to go ahead and dump that information out. Okay, now let's go a little bit further. It's going to show you to get help identify issues in memory. If we look at the loader modules for these processes, so we started to investigate, hey, that process 868, the one that violated the VAT address protections, show me what the loader modules were, and it says that, oh, here's a DLL that was loaded. It's loaded in, but it wasn't during the initialization of the executable. It happened after the fact. Oh, that's interesting, right? Let's go ahead and increase the verbosity on that. All right, so now we can get the base load paths, all right? And just by using this TAC V up here, that's the only thing we changed. We just added TAC V, provides a lot more information now, give you the base path information. So if we go down to our, right here, this path, we say that it wasn't loaded in initialization and that an executable is the base load path. That's also anomalous. So now we were able to identify these ranges here. So if you look here, it says 0x 100,000. Okay, we see that over here. We go back. Oh. Okay. Oh, there we go. So that's right there. Okay. Well, and then let's go to this again. We're interested in dumping out all these pages, so we'll use the vad dump command. We'll give it a PID, specify a directory to dump it into, and it'll go ahead and dump it out. Now, like I said, preserving names, sometimes they'll give a name on it, sometimes it's just a memory address range. So that's why you want to kind of save summary information. That particular memory range, the VAD page that got dumped out is a .dmp. You run the file command on them, just kind of be like, hey, what are these, files that were dumped out of the VAD pages? Mostly data, a couple executables, and then we're like, okay, well, let's get a little bit more information on this. So this is actually output from the binwalk command. Has anybody ever heard of binwalk? Binwalk is really good. I totally suggest using binwalk If you're trying to find out, sections of a binary file, it can also do the hashing. You see right here, for example, you get the hash right here, the MD5 checksum, and a little bit more detail about the file itself, right? Because you want to see if there's other files embedded within it. Okay, so we took the hash, boom. You see that this thing, after we put that bad page, we took the hash, we dropped it at virus total, and it says Dooku. Does anybody know what Dooku is? It's basically another name for Stuxnet. Okay, so now as part of the your IR lifecycle, you really want to understand. Okay, we found this malware. This is doing some strange behavior. What happened? How did it get on the machine? What happened just before that? So this is how we're going to get into timelines. Okay, so let's just go ahead 1 sec. Now, really quick, thought I had the command line on there. Hold on. Don't have it listed there? Okay, so there's a timeliner plugin. We don't have that on. You basically run this timeliner plugin, and you can specify what your output file is. So if you're using like a log2 timeline tool, you can output as a body file format and be able to dump that right into your sleuth kit, FTK, log2 timeline, whatever, and it'll become part of your great, comprehensive timeline for whatever your event that you're working. But what I like to do is actually load up, in 1 second, I'm gonna have to turn on my hotspot real quick. Any questions so far? Okay, all right, there we go. So when I went to load this up, it just showed blank, but if we view the page source here, what I did was I outputted Timeliner in the HTML format as an output option. So you have body format, you have CSV format. When you export it out as HTML, you actually get a JSON object, a huge one. So you see here, data set, rows, and you could just write a little set expression and just chop all that out if you just wanted to take the JSON and load it into MongoDB or whatever, and you could work with it like that. But what's really cool about this is the reason I had to turn the hotspot on is because it loads a JavaScript library from a CDN, and then it gives you this interface here, right? And so this is just the data table, JavaScript data table. It's a very commonly used library. And you're able to, do partial match up here, all the LSAS. But what we're interested in now is we need to go to the point in time where that strange, executable injection happened. So we're gonna go back. Okay, so if we look here, we can see, okay, these things started at 2011, June 3rd at 4:26. All right, so now we're gonna go back to our timeline. We're gonna change how many entries are on the page. And we wanna go to that point in time. So if you see here, really quick, the time is supposed to be right here. So let me shoot forward. What this means is that it was able to identify the constructs existed in RAM for whatever those were. These are DLLO libraries. You can see here what's happening is this was the process, it tells you what's going on. But the time is missing because either that section of the construct was corrupted or partially overwritten or something, and it's, it'll show weird data in that case, but it will show you something did happen. You might not have full integrity of it anymore though. Okay, so we're going to go to that point in time. It was 426, I believe. Then this is everything. Changes to the registry processes, network connections. Okay, so now we're getting close. Okay, so we're about there. So remember, it said it was at 426.55 here. That's the process, LSAS. Now, right before that, you see this UEME rub path right here, document settings, and then look at that executable name right there. That looks normal, right? It's perfectly fine. It probably has a cool icon of a dolphin or something, but harmless. Just click away. So now we take the same process that we used before when we wanted to dump out or identify, we want to identify processes that interacted with this executable now. And so we'll go ahead and we'll do a Yara scan, for example, for this file name here. We don't even have to put the exe, it's looking pretty unique. So we just drop that file name in there, and then we kind of go from there, see what processes interacted with that file to get an idea of what dropped the file onto the computer. So that's typically how you do it. You want to figure out how the artifact got there, how to detect the artifact, and how to prevent it from happening again. Is kind of an IR life cycle. So yeah. Okay, so this just speaks to what I was saying before. I really dig this timeliner piece. I'm surprised I didn't put the command line up there. I thought I had it, but I have a couple versions of this presentation. But it supports these different outputs. So if you want to even dump it out to Excel, you have to have the Excel Python module to do the Excel one, but pretty much everything else will work just fine. I always choose the HTML option because then it'll give you that cool little interface, quickly get through, see what's going on. And then you can even just take the JSON and dump it into another tool if you want to. But that's about it for my materials. Anybody got any questions?
Does that work with the Libre Office, for example, as well as Excel?
Oh yeah, I'm sure Libre can load it up. I mean, Libre supports Excel files and whatnot, so I'm sure. I'm pretty sure I've even done that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any questions?
Good stuff.
Was that?
Good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah. No, this is just wanted to give kind of a little workflow, and this is not all the ways to identify malware in a RAM image. It's up to your creativity, right? But these are some of the ways, like the malfind command. We did see in the process list, you can get a poster that's called Knowing Evil. It's a SANS poster. And it'll show you basically, there's only supposed to be this many of this process. This process is supposed to be spawned by this other process. If it doesn't occur like that, then it is anomalous. Knowing that stuff will help you get to the root of the problem quicker when you're doing memory analysis. And it's just an iteration thing. You can literally, just keep going at it every day, and then eventually it'll just all be there. So you just kind of gotta do iterations on it. But yeah, yes.
Do you run it on Android?
I haven't actually analyzed Android images, but there is a tool called Lime, and it will load a driver to extract memory out of Android. So you can do that. I just haven't done it. All right, well, that's about it.